The skid steer fired back up and shoved another pile of broken stone toward the drainage lane. Water hissed through the cracks beneath the debris. I could already hear the culvert intake choking. Not fully blocked yet. But close. One hard rain and the entire downhill side of Willowbrook Circle would start holding water like a bathtub. I stepped past Linda and grabbed the orange cone out of the driveway. "Move the truck," I said. The operator looked nervous now. His floodlight swept across the ditch line behind my house. Muddy water was already pooling near the grate. Linda did not even glance at it. "You are interfering with scheduled maintenance," she said. "Scheduled by who?" I asked. She flipped a page on her clipboard without answering. That tiny movement told me she was buying time. Then I noticed something else. No county markings. No city permits taped to the equipment. No erosion barriers either. They had started excavation work 6 feet from an active stormwater channel without containment. Even a rookie contractor knew better than that. One of the crewmen muttered, "This does not feel right." Linda shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. He stopped talking immediately. The cold air carried the smell of wet dirt and overheated hydraulics. Somewhere down the street, a dog started barking. Porch lights flicked on one by one across the neighborhood. People were waking up. Linda hated witnesses. "Take your equipment and leave," I said. "Now." She smiled again. Smaller this time. Meaner. "You should really check your mailbox in the morning." There it was. The threat hidden inside suburban politeness. Then her radio crackled. A voice asked if the west gate had been shut down yet. Linda grabbed the radio too fast. "Negative," she snapped. "Not yet." My stomach tightened. The west gate controlled runoff flow behind 4 properties, including mine. Nobody touched that gate except county contractors and me. I started walking toward the drainage lane. Linda stepped directly into my path. "That area is restricted during maintenance operations." "You do not control county infrastructure," I said. "Neither do you," she answered. That lie hung in the air between us. Heavy. Deliberate. The truth sat 20 yards behind her in a locked green utility box with my contractor tag still attached to the access panel. Then thunder rolled somewhere far off beyond the tree line. Low. Distant. But real. I looked up automatically. Thick clouds were moving in from the west faster than they should have. Rain smell mixed with diesel fumes. The operator killed the skid steer engine again. Even he was watching the sky now. Linda noticed it too. For the first time all night, her confidence slipped for half a second. Just enough. I walked past her before she could stop me and crouched near the culvert intake. Broken stone blocked almost half the grate. Cedar splinters floated in the black water. Then my flashlight beam caught fresh scrape marks on the gate control housing upstream. Silver metal exposed beneath green paint. Somebody had already tried forcing it open. I stood up slowly. That gate regulated flood overflow for the entire western side of Willowbrook Estates. And somebody had tampered with it in the middle of the night. I pulled my flashlight closer to the control housing and ran my thumb across the scrape marks. Fresh metal dust stuck to my fingertips. Somebody had jammed a pry bar into the access seam recently. The padlock was still hanging there, but the latch looked twisted. Rain started tapping against the cedar trees behind the drainage lane. Light at first. Cold drops. Then more followed. The operator climbed down from the skid steer and stared at the culvert. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "water is backing up already." Linda ignored him. She was watching me instead. That bothered me more than the damaged wall. She was not worried about flooding. She was worried about what I knew. I stood and walked toward the utility box beside the gate controls. Mud sucked at my boots. Water hissed through the blocked grate louder now. The entire drainage channel was rising inch by inch under the flashlight beam. I reached for the contractor tag clipped to the panel. Gone. The metal ring still dangled there, swinging slightly in the rain. Somebody had removed my county access tag within the last few hours. My jaw tightened. Only approved. Contractors had gate authority on this side of Willowbrook. If someone opened that overflow gate during heavy rain, runoff would bypass the retention basin completely and slam straight into the lower subdivision. Linda folded her arms. County maintenance reassigned those controls yesterday. That was impossible. I had inspected the west system myself 2 days earlier. No reassignment notice. No work order. No county email. Nothing. Then a sharp electronic chirp cut through the rain. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Emergency weather alert. Flash flood advisory for Fulton County until 6 a.m. The operator swore quietly under his breath. Water was moving faster now. Brown runoff swirled around the broken stones jammed against the grate. I stepped into the ditch and started pulling chunks of cedar free with both hands. Wet bark scraped my palms. The current tugged harder than it should have for a light storm. Something upstream was already feeding excess flow into the channel. Linda finally looked uneasy. "You should probably leave that alone," she said. "If this area floods, liability becomes complicated." I laughed once. "Short. Cold. You are standing in the liability." Another truck rolled into the street behind us. White headlights swept across the broken wall and stopped on Linda. A black SUV with the Willowbrook Estates board decal on the windshield. 2 HOA board members climbed out wearing rain jackets over business clothes like they had rushed over from bed. One of them, Mark Ellison, looked down at the rising water and immediately lost color in his face. "Linda," he said sharply, "why is the West Channel open?" She snapped back too fast. "It is under control." Mark glanced at me. Then at the skid steer. Then at the blocked culvert. His breathing changed. Faster. Nervous. He knew exactly what he was looking at. That caught my attention immediately. Most board members treated storm systems like invisible plumbing. Mark was reacting like a man staring at a loaded weapon. Rain hammered harder against the pavement now. Gutters overflowed along the curb. Somewhere downhill, I heard a car alarm chirp twice and die. Then my flashlight beam landed on something. Half buried in the mud beside the utility box. A yellow county inspection seal. Torn clean off the gate housing. Rain hammered the street hard enough to blur the floodlights into white smears across the pavement. I picked the torn county inspection seal out of the mud and wiped it clean against my jacket sleeve. The adhesive backing was still wet. Fresh tear. Fresh removal. Mark Ellison stared at it like he wanted it back in the ground. Linda stepped forward immediately. "That does not belong to him," she snapped. Nobody answered her. Water rushed louder through the drainage lane now. Fast. Dirty. The blocked grate shuddered under the pressure. One more surge and debris would force water over the curb line. I could already picture it spilling downhill into the lower cul-de-sac where half the residents parked luxury SUVs nose-first against their garages. Mark lowered his voice. "Ethan, maybe we should handle this privately." That sentence told me more than anything else tonight. HOA board members never wanted privacy unless liability was involved. I turned my flashlight toward the gate housing again. The lock was bent inward near the latch. Somebody had forced tools into it multiple times. Then I saw shallow boot prints in the mud beside the utility box. Deep heel pattern. Commercial work boots. Not county issued. The tread crossed directly toward the skid steer tracks. Linda noticed me following the prints. "You are making assumptions," she said quickly. "No," I said. I am making observations. Thunder cracked much closer this time. The operator looked up at the sky and climbed back into the skid steer without being asked. He wanted out. Smart man. But when he turned the key, the machine only clicked once. Dead battery. His expression changed instantly. That was not happening 10 minutes ago, he muttered. Rainwater dripped off the machine cage in silver streaks. Then another sound rolled through the dark. A deep metallic groan upstream. My head snapped toward the west channel. Every contractor who works storm systems knows that sound. Gate pressure. The overflow gate was moving. Slowly. Against water force. I grabbed my flashlight and ran along the drainage path behind the wall debris. Mud splashed against my jeans. Water soaked through my boots immediately. Behind me, somebody shouted my name, but I kept moving. The west gate sat about 70 yards uphill where the retention channel narrowed between two concrete banks. My flashlight beam bounced across the runoff until it landed on the gate wheel. It was turning. By itself. Slow. Uneven. But turning. The locking chain hung loose beside it. My pulse hit hard once against my ribs. Somebody had disengaged the manual lock before the storm arrived. Water surged beneath the gate opening in thick brown waves, carrying leaves, trash, and broken cedar chunks downstream toward the lower subdivision. That gate was supposed to stay restricted during heavy flow conditions. County rules. Standard procedure. Simple. But somebody had bypassed the lock completely. Then I spotted the tool bag. Black canvas. Half hidden behind a concrete barrier near the gate controls. Rain soaked the fabric dark. I crouched and pulled it closer. Inside sat two heavy pry bars, bolt cutters, and a pair of yellow work gloves covered in fresh red hydraulic fluid. Not mud. Not rust. Hydraulic fluid. The same color I saw leaking beneath the skid steer axle. I heard footsteps splashing behind me. Fast. Linda's voice cut through the rain. Do not touch that. Too late. My flashlight landed on the white contractor label stitched inside the bag. Willowbrook Estates Property Services. Rainwater hammered the concrete channel hard enough to vibrate through my boots. I held the soaked tool bag open while Linda stopped 3 feet away from me under the floodlights. Water dripped from the edge of her hair onto her white rain jacket. Her eyes locked onto the contractor label inside the bag for half a second. Then she recovered. Anybody could have planted that, she said. Too fast again. Mark Ellison looked sick now. He kept staring uphill toward the moving gate wheel. The chain hanging loose beside it clinked softly in the wind. Every sound out there felt sharper with the storm building. The operator finally climbed out of the dead skid steer and walked backward toward his truck. He wanted distance from this entire situation. Smart again. I reached into the bag carefully and pulled out a folded maintenance worksheet sealed inside a plastic sleeve. Rain bounced off the flashlight beam while I unfolded it. Willowbrook Estates Emergency Drainage Diversion. Tonight's date sat printed across the top. My stomach tightened. The work order listed the west overflow channel and my address directly beneath it. Scheduled debris removal. Temporary flow redirection. No county authorization number anywhere on the page. No municipal approval stamp either. Just Linda's signature at the bottom beside a rushed set of initials from somebody named D. Mercer. I knew that name. Dale Mercer owned Mercer Landscape and Excavation. Cheap contractor. Multiple county warnings. Twice fined for runoff violations. Linda stepped closer immediately. That document is private HOA property. No, I said. It is evidence. Thunder cracked overhead hard enough to shake the drainage railings. Water exploded beneath the partially opened gate upstream. The flow had doubled since we first came outside. That should not have happened from a normal summer storm alone. Then I realized the retention basin upstream was not filling anymore. It was bypassing. Completely. Somebody had redirected the runoff before the rain even started. My flashlight swept across the gate assembly again. The manual override pin was missing. Gone entirely. Whoever opened the gate knew exactly how the system worked. Mark wiped rainwater from his face with shaking fingers. "Linda," he said quietly, "tell me you did not authorize a bypass release." She ignored him. "Ethan has no authority over HOA maintenance operations." I almost laughed hearing that beside an active county flood channel. Then headlights flashed farther downhill. Another vehicle pulling into the subdivision. Bigger this time. County utility truck. Yellow strobes reflected off the water racing through the ditch. Somebody must have triggered an overflow sensor alarm. The timing hit Linda instantly. Her posture changed. Small shift. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Panic finally reached her. She turned toward the operator. "Get that gate closed now." The operator stared at the rushing water like she had asked him to stop a river with his hands. "The lock assembly is damaged," he said. "We should not even be touching it." Exactly. County utility trucks do not arrive quietly. Diesel engines rumbled through the storm while amber lights painted the trees gold. One truck stopped near the broken wall. Another rolled toward the drainage lane behind us. Linda grabbed the worksheet from my hands suddenly, but wet paper tears easily. Half stayed with me. Half stayed with her. The ripped page fluttered sideways in the rain. Right across the top sat the printed line she forgot to hide. Overflow release approved pending lower property flooding assessment. The county trucks rolled to a stop beside the drainage lane with their amber lights flashing through the rain like warning beacons. Two utility inspectors climbed out wearing reflective jackets already soaked dark at the shoulders. One of them, a heavy-set guy named Carl Benton, recognized me immediately. "Ethan," he shouted over the storm, "why is the west bypass active?" Linda answered before I could. "Emergency overflow mitigation," she said. Carl looked at the open gate. Then at the broken wall. Then at the skid steer sitting dead in the mud. His expression hardened fast. "Who authorized this release?" Nobody spoke for a second. Rain hammered the channel hard enough to drown out the distant thunder now. Water rushed beneath the partially raised gate in thick brown surges, carrying branches and pieces of cedar fencing downhill toward the lower subdivision. Carl stepped toward the control assembly and crouched beside the damaged lock housing. "This seal was active yesterday," he muttered. He picked up the torn county inspection sticker from the concrete edge and held it beneath his flashlight. "Who removed this?" Linda folded her arms tightly. "We reported structural instability near the drainage lane." Carl stood slowly. "That does not answer my question." The operator backed farther away from the skid steer. "Smart again. Nobody wanted ownership of this scene anymore." Another inspector walked toward the utility box beside the gate controls. He opened the panel, shined his flashlight. Inside, then froze. "Carl," he called sharply, "the override key assembly is missing." My stomach dropped lower. That key assembly controlled emergency manual release settings for the entire West Channel. County property. Serialized equipment. Not something an HOA could legally touch. Carl turned toward Linda carefully now. "You need to explain exactly what happened tonight." Linda's confidence cracked for real this time. Tiny things gave it away. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing shortened. Water soaked through the edges of her perfect white sleeves while she searched for an answer that no longer existed. Then headlights swept across the subdivision entrance again. More vehicles. Not county this time. Residents. People had noticed the water. Doors slammed uphill while neighbors gathered beneath umbrellas and porch lights. Somebody pointed toward the rushing channel. Somebody else started filming on their phone. Linda hated that most of all. Witnesses. Mark Ellison stepped beside me quietly. Rain rolled down his glasses. This was supposed to be controlled drainage work, he whispered. Linda said county approval was pending. Pending. That word hit me immediately. I looked down at the ripped worksheet still clutched in my hand. Overflow release approved pending lower property flooding assessment. Not approved. Pending. Meaning they opened the gate before authorization existed. My flashlight beam drifted back toward the broken wall debris clogging the culvert below. Then the realization landed all at once. Hard. Cold. Deliberate. They were never protecting the subdivision tonight. They were redirecting water away from the new development uphill. Straight toward the older homes downhill. Including mine. Carl must have reached the same conclusion because his entire posture changed. He grabbed his radio immediately. "Dispatch," he barked, "I need emergency records pulled for all West Channel authorization requests in the last 48 hours. Lightning flashed overhead bright enough to bleach the entire drainage lane white for half a second. In that flash, I saw Linda glance toward the black HOA SUV parked downhill. Not panic this time. Calculation. Then she turned and started walking toward it fast. Rain pounded the subdivision hard enough to turn the streetlights into blurry halos across the flooded pavement. Linda moved quickly toward the black HOA SUV, heels splashing through runoff water while residents gathered farther downhill beneath umbrellas and porch awnings. Carl Benton saw it too. "Ma'am," he shouted, "you need to stay here." She ignored him completely. That alone told everybody watching exactly how bad this had become. Mark Ellison grabbed my arm lightly. "Ethan," he said under his breath, "the upper development has been flooding for months." I turned toward him immediately. Rainwater streamed off the edge of his glasses. "What upper development?" His face tightened. "The new Ridgecrest homes behind the retention basin." Then another surge roared through the channel loud enough to cut him off. Water exploded beneath the partially opened gate and slammed downstream into the culvert below my driveway. The blocked grate finally gave way with a deep metallic bang. Muddy water burst through the opening like a released fire hose. Neighbors gasped downhill as runoff spilled across the curb line and raced along the street gutters. Carl swore sharply into his radio. "We need barricades on Willowbrook Circle now." Flashing hazard lights reflected off the floodwater spreading across the lower road. I watched the current carefully. The flow pattern made no sense unless upstream pressure had already overloaded the retention basin hours ago. Then it clicked. Ridgecrest sat 15 feet higher than the older Willowbrook homes. New construction. Fresh grading. Half-finished drainage lines. If the upper basin failed inspection, developers could lose millions waiting for occupancy permits. Unless somebody redirected overflow before inspectors saw the backup levels. Mark looked sick realizing I understood it. "Linda said temporary diversion would protect property values," he muttered. Property values. There it was. Not safety. Not maintenance. Money. Everything tonight suddenly lined up perfectly. The destroyed wall. The forced bypass release. The missing county key assembly. They were trying to dump floodwater into the older section of Willowbrook before the storm exposed drainage failures uphill. My house just happened to sit directly beside the west overflow channel. A county inspector jogged uphill toward us carrying a waterproof tablet under his jacket. "Carl," he shouted, breathing hard, "dispatch pulled the authorization records." Carl grabbed the tablet immediately. Rain hammered against the screen while he scrolled through emergency request logs. Then his expression changed completely. Flat. Cold. Dangerous. There was no pending approval, he said quietly. Mark stared at him. What? Carl looked up slowly toward the black HOA SUV. The authorization request was denied yesterday morning. The rain suddenly felt colder against my skin. Linda had known. Every second tonight had been deliberate. She had destroyed my wall to access the drainage lane anyway. Carl turned the tablet around toward me. Across the screen sat the rejected county request tied directly to Willowbrook Estates HOA operations. Reason for denial: unauthorized redirection risk to lower residential properties. My property. The older homes downhill. Every family sleeping there tonight. Then headlights flared inside the black SUV. Linda had started the engine. Carl immediately stepped into the flooded street and raised one hand. Do not leave this subdivision. For one long second, the SUV idled in place beneath the rain. Then the engine revved harder. The black SUV lurched forward through the flooded street, tires spraying dirty water across the curb line. Carl Benton jumped sideways just before the bumper reached him. Residents scattered backward under umbrellas while brake lights glowed red through the rain. Linda was trying to leave. That made everything worse instantly. County inspectors do not panic when paperwork goes bad. They panic when somebody runs. Carl grabbed his radio hard enough that static crackled through the storm. County dispatch, I need law enforcement at Willowbrook West Channel immediately. The SUV fishtailed slightly near the flooded intersection downhill. Water was already climbing over the lower sidewalks now. Not catastrophic yet. But enough to damage garages and crawl spaces. If the overflow continued another 20 minutes. I looked uphill toward the retention channel. The gate was still partially open. Water kept surging through like a broken artery. Then I saw the problem nobody else noticed yet. The bypass pressure had shifted debris against the secondary control rail. If the gate jammed fully open under load, the lower subdivision would take the entire basin release at once. I started moving uphill fast. Carl shouted after me, but I kept going. Rain hammered my face hard enough to sting while runoff churned around my boots. The concrete banks vibrated beneath the force of the current. Halfway to the gate, my flashlight beam caught fresh scrape marks on the emergency hand wheel assembly. Somebody had tried forcing the mechanism farther open after the lock was removed. Deliberate again. Every piece fit tighter now. I reached the control housing and grabbed the exposed manual crank arm. Cold steel. Slick with rain. The pressure pulling against the gate felt wrong immediately. Too heavy for normal storm flow. I leaned my shoulder into the wheel and started forcing it back clockwise inch by inch. Metal groaned through the channel. Water roared louder beneath me. Then another set of headlights swept across the upper hill behind the retention basin. Large vehicles. Construction trucks. My stomach dropped. Ridgecrest Development. Even in the rain, I recognized the contractor logos parked near the unfinished homes uphill. 3 trucks sat lined beside the temporary grading road with their floodlights off like they were trying not to be seen. Somebody had been working the drainage line before the storm arrived. Mark finally caught up beside me, soaked and breathing hard. Ethan, he said, you need to see this. He shoved his phone toward me. Security footage. Grainy. Time stamped just before midnight. Linda's SUV parked beside the Ridgecrest overflow trench while excavation crews redirected runoff barriers uphill. My jaw tightened. They had rerouted the entire storm channel before touching my wall. My property was never the target. It was the release point. Carl's voice echoed uphill from below. Sheriff units are inbound. The moment he said that, the construction trucks behind Ridgecrest started moving. Engines fired one after another in the darkness. Not leaving normally either. Fast. Nervous. Floodlights flashed across the unfinished drainage berm near the upper basin, and for one split second I saw muddy water pouring through a fresh excavation cut straight into the overflow channel. Illegal diversion trench. Freshly dug. The storm had exposed everything. Then the gate will jerked violently beneath my hands. Something inside the control assembly snapped with a sharp metallic crack. The entire mechanism locked in place. The cracked gate mechanism screamed against the pressure of the stormwater and froze completely. Rain hammered the channel walls while muddy runoff blasted beneath the half-open steel barrier in violent brown waves. I leaned my full weight against the manual wheel again. Nothing moved. The secondary rail had warped under pressure. If the upper basin kept dumping water through that illegal diversion trench, the west channel would overflow straight into the lower subdivision within minutes. Mark stared uphill at the Ridgecrest trucks disappearing through the rain. "They are running," he said quietly. I already knew why. Nobody abandons million-dollar equipment in a storm unless investigators are coming. Sheriff sirens echoed faintly somewhere beyond the subdivision entrance. Blue lights flickered through the rain clouds downhill. Carl Benton climbed the concrete bank beside me, breathing hard. "We just got the county schematics," he shouted over the water. "There is an emergency bypass lockout below the secondary culvert." My head snapped toward him instantly. Of course there was. Older systems always had manual containment failsafes buried somewhere beneath the overflow lines. Most people never knew they existed. I did. My father helped install this drainage network 30 years ago before Willowbrook expanded uphill into luxury developments and golf cart politics. He used to tell me the county hid emergency lockouts underground because people panic when they see flood controls. But buried steel still matters. Especially when rich people start moving water around like it belongs to them. Carl pointed downhill toward the lower channel access grate near my destroyed wall. "If we engage the lockout manually, it will force the overflow back into the retention basin." Mark looked horrified. "That could flood Ridgecrest." Carl did not blink. "That is where the water belongs." Thunder cracked overhead so hard it shook the rail beneath my hands. Then another surge exploded through the gate opening. Water spilled over the concrete edge and rushed across the grass behind my property. The lower homes were seconds from taking the full hit. I ran downhill through the rain with Carl beside me. Water splashed above my ankles now. Residents stood on porches watching silently beneath flashing emergency lights. Nobody was filming anymore. This had stopped being neighborhood drama. The lower access grate sat half hidden beneath runoff and broken cedar debris from my wall. Carl dropped to one knee and shoved his gloved hands into the water searching for the buried release housing. I joined him immediately. Cold muddy water soaked through my sleeves while branches scraped against the concrete. Then my fingers hit metal. Circular well housing. Still intact. Carl slammed the emergency release key into place and looked at me once. On three. We turned together. The mechanism resisted hard at first. Rust groaned beneath the pavement. Then suddenly the underground lockout engaged with a deep metallic slam that echoed through the drainage line like distant thunder. Everything changed instantly. The water flow shifted direction beneath our feet. Upstream pressure surged backward through the channel toward Ridgecrest. Somewhere uphill, alarms started screaming through the rain. Construction floodlights flickered wildly against the storm clouds. Then the sheriff cruisers reached the subdivision entrance just as the first retention berm at Ridgecrest collapsed into its own unfinished trench system. Carl looked uphill once and shook his head slowly. They built half that development on fake drainage reports. Rain rolled off the broken stones of my father's wall while floodwater rushed back toward the people who redirected it there in the first place.